In a haze of pink and purple, a man with dark hair and a woman share an intense, sparkling gaze. Thump. The black-haired man suddenly pushes the startled, white-haired woman onto a bed. He leans over her, gently taking her hand as he moves in for a tender kiss. As they share a passionate kiss, surrounded by rose petals, she thinks that this is what a kiss feels like. Good, but suffocating. Their hands remain intertwined, a quiet symbol of their connection. He pulls back slightly, breathing out as he whispers her name. Meryl. The scene changes to a horse-drawn carriage, speeding through a field at dusk. Inside, Meryl gazes out the window toward a grand, imposing mansion in the distance. Her expression is full of sorrow and apprehension as the carriage brings her closer to the estate. The massive, lonely mansion stands ominously under a dark and cloudy sky. Meryl thinks of the man she is to meet, the country's third prince, a ruthless murderer without blood or tears, shown holding a skull. The vision of the prince shows him standing callously on a pile of human skulls. The carriage finally pulls up to the formidable estate. Clutching the brooch on her dress, Meryl steels herself, revealing that today she gets engaged to him. Her mind flashes back to her beautiful mother, whose captivating smile made men throw money at her feet. She remembers her mother laughing and drinking with admiring men in a tavern. Her mother would dismissively tell her that children should go to bed early. Meryl reveals that though she spent many nights alone, she never acted out, because this is her second time living through childhood. She recalls her past self, a lonely, barefoot girl sitting sadly on a wooden chair. She remembers her drunk mother dropping coins, which she would pick up before heading to the market where women would whisper pityingly about her. She reflects that because people would give her bread if she looked hungry, she never truly starved. However, due to her mother's spending, they were always in poverty, with creditors banging on the door demanding their money back. The scene shifts to a large, brightly lit mansion on a rainy night. Her mother stands with her before the estate of the great noble, Marquise Rockfell-Hulgan. Young Meryl stares up in shock, overwhelmed by the sudden change. Her mother whispers that this will be her new home, leaving Meryl stunned and confused. Meryl watches as her mother hands a box to a man in a suit, finalizing the deal. With a cheerful wave and a bye-bye, her mother abandons her, carrying a suitcase as she leaves. Left alone, Meryl thinks to herself with detachment, "You're not crying." She turns as a deep, low voice catches her attention. She sees a rugged, handsome, older man in a white uniform, the Marquis, and thinks he must have been quite a looker in his youth. Facing the Marquis, she asks, "Why would I cry?" believing her unexpected answer has surprised him. The Marquis looks on, slightly taken aback by her question. She watches as he lets out a low chuckle, a slight smile forming on his lips. The memory fades, showing a grown Meryl, now a beautiful young woman in an elegant blue gown. The scene blurs, shifting to a memory of a modern city street at night. She recalls her final moment from her previous life, lying bloody on the pavement after being hit by a drunk driver's car. The memory shifts again, back to the bustling streets of a town from her new life. She remembers being a small child, led by the hand through the cobblestone streets by her mother. Now grown, she reflects on how she became the adopted daughter of a Marquis. She had puzzled over why the Marquis, who had many children of his own, adopted her, concluding it was because her hair and eye color matched theirs. Regardless of the reason, her life became one of luxury. She now spends her days enjoying tea and pastries with other noble women. The scene returns to the present, as a carriage travels through a dark forest. Meryl's face fills with doubt, as she wonders if she was just a commodity for the Marquis, not a true daughter. Looking at the castle from the window, she's told this will be her new home and the place to carry out her mission. Meryl feels an ominous aura from the castle, but her maid insists it's just her imagination. She panics at the thought of marrying a man she's never seen, but her maid calmly reminds her it's only an engagement. She resigns herself to her fate as the carriage continues on. She is to be the bride of a notorious murderer with a claim to the throne. A bloody scene reveals the identity of her fiancé, the third prince, Merhail van Hale Sitzfried. The third prince is depicted as a shadowy murderer who has personally sent over 100 people to their graves. In a nightmarish vision, a bride like Meryl takes the hand of a demonic entity, realizing she has no one to protect her. She laments never finding romance in her past life, only to be forced into marriage with a murderer in this one. A high-ranking noble in a blue uniform points commandingly, promising any reward to someone if they bring Prince Meryl back to the palace. The scene transitions back to the imposing estate, her new home. Standing outside, Meryl clutches her dress, stealing her resolve. She recalls her romantic inexperience, noting the only time she held a boy's hand was in an elementary school dance. Accompanied by a butler, she stands before a grand, brightly lit doorway. The butler leads her down a long, magnificent hall. Meryl looks up in surprise as an unseen voice informs her that this is Duke Meryl's castle. The fearsome, shadowed figure of the Duke, Meryl Van Hale, is shown. His reputation is reinforced as he stands over a pile of defeated knights, a man who never loses. His violent streak began. After that, he just kept taking lives. The narration explains over an image of his castle. As she settles in, she ponders the rumor that the Emperor sent him here to give him time to settle down. She observes her new surroundings, thinking the massive hall is completely empty. She wanders through the desolate, echoing space. Her expression brightens with curiosity as she throws open a large window. Her face twists in shock at what she sees outside. Looking down, she realizes with horror that the castle is perched on the edge of a massive cliff. An exclamation of pure alarm fills her mind as she recoils from the window. Leaning out again, she realizes her new home is basically a prison. Stumbling back, she confirms with dread that she is completely locked up. Ugh. Mentally and physically exhausted, she collapses onto the luxurious bed. For a brief moment, she finds comfort in the softness of the bed. Her peace fades as she lies awake, her expression turning grim. Resigned to her fate, she decides to let the prince kill her, hoping a death in her sleep will be painless. She drifts off, succumbing to her exhaustion. A man with blonde hair and a regal uniform stands over her sleeping form. The blonde-haired man observes her, thinking to himself what a carefree woman she is. The scene shifts back outside the castle, as an unseen person asks if something is wrong. Startled, a servant jumps as the white-haired woman asks him for the location of the dining hall. The servant bows, identifying her as Lady Irelia, and she confirms her new name. Irelia's face lights up with delight at the prospect of a meal. A lavish serving cart with a full tea service and covered dishes is presented. A new servant with short, blonde hair bows, welcoming Lady Irelia. Upon entering the dining room, Irelia and her servants are met with a surprising sight. As she sits at the empty table, a servant gestures nervously behind her. Irelia wonders if the staff is surprised that she is handling things herself. She makes a simple request, asking a servant to place the fork on the right side. The servant presents the meal, and Irelia stares in surprise. Her eyes widen in realization as she looks closely at the servant. The short-haired servant introduces themselves as Yuri, a name Irelia thoughtfully repeats. Irelia is momentarily confused, wondering if the delicate-looking Yuri is a man. She observes that while Yuri's uniform is standard, their slender figure stands out. Pointing directly, Irelia asks if Yuri is a woman, which Yuri confirms, admitting Irelia's confusion is understandable. Yuri laughs good-naturedly, explaining their short hair is the result of an accident in the dining hall. Irelia watches Yuri, looking intrigued and lost in thought. Yuri gets her attention, and Irelia snaps back to the present. She chides herself internally for spacing out again. Irelia asks Yuri about her job, and Yuri hesitantly reveals her main task is to avoid standing out. A confused Irelia questions if avoiding attention is a job, prompting Yuri to remind her this is Prince Meryl's castle. Yuri elaborates that the prince's domain is a harsh northern land, where winter is nearly endless and life is unsustainable. She then reveals the strange truth. Everyone lives here specifically to watch over Prince Meryl. Irelia reacts with stunned disbelief, questioning what it means to watch over him. Yuri gravely explains that His Highness is forbidden from ever setting foot outside the castle. The full weight of the prince's imprisonment dawns on Irelia. Yuri continues, stating that they all serve in silence, careful never to anger the man known as a murderer. Gulp. Irelia swallows nervously, the immense danger of her situation finally sinking in. She realizes everyone is living in a deadly game of hide-and-seek, hoping to avoid the Reaper-like prince. Yuri warns Irelia she must adapt, as the lavish life she's known will not be possible here. Irelia recalls her adopted sister's taunts about her low birth, reflecting that she is already used to such insults. With a confident smile, she waves off the concern, declaring that it doesn't bother her. Yuri leans in with a worried expression, asking Irelia to explain what she means. Yuri explains the castle's layout. the East Wing for servants and the separate West Wing. Holding up 2 fingers, Yuri urgently warns her to stay out of the West Wing, but Irelia asks why. The West Wing belongs to His Highness, Yuri explains, a place so dangerous that not even she would be safe there. Irelia smiles and waves reassuringly, telling the worried Yuri not to worry. Standing alone in the grand hallway, she resolves not to go where she is not wanted. A small, thoughtful smile appears as she decides she just needs to find a place to stay quietly. She wanders down the long hall, admiring the ornate chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. She lightly chides herself, realizing she's spacing out again. Whoa! She gasps in amazement as she steps into a magnificent new room. To her surprise, she has discovered a massive and beautiful library. Curious, she picks up a random book and is surprised to find it's an animal encyclopedia. Noticing another book is a novel, she concludes the library's collection is completely random. Now standing back in the main hall, she wonders with a sudden chill if it was always this dark. A shiver runs down her spine as she nervously glances around the suddenly ominous room. Her eyes widen as she tries to understand what's happening around her. She realizes the hall has changed. Dimmer lighting, new paintings, and vases have appeared out of nowhere. Her eyes dart around in panic as she fears she's become lost. Ah! Yuri's warning about the West Wing echoes in her mind, and she covers her face in despair. Realizing she's somehow entered the forbidden West Wing, she bolts down the hall in a panic. As she flees, Yuri's voice warns that His Highness despises intruders in his territory. Tears well in her eyes as she looks back, terrified of being discovered. She collapses against a wall, clutching her chest as she struggles to breathe. Overwhelmed by fear, she stares down the dark, imposing hallway. She cautiously peeks around a corner, desperately searching for an escape route. Peeking out, she sees the hall is empty before collapsing against the wall in overwhelming fear. Hiding her face in her hands, she weeps silently, feeling utterly alone and terrified. Suddenly, a pair of pristine, high-heeled boots stops directly in front of her. She looks up with a start to see a blonde-haired man staring down at her. The handsome man in the regal uniform glares at her with intense blue eyes. Staring back, she wonders who this man is, recalling the murderer was supposed to have black hair. The blonde-haired man continues to observe her with a cold, unreadable expression. Mistaking him for staff, she timidly asks if he is a servant here. The man's stern expression falters, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. She offers a nervous, uncertain smile, hoping to appear harmless. He suddenly grabs her wrist, telling her to follow him as he pulls her away against her surprised protests. He swiftly pulls her behind a large column, hiding them both in the shadows of the hallway. Hiding behind the column, she timidly asks the blonde-haired man where they are. The blonde-haired man looks surprised as she puts a hand on his chest, exclaiming she knew it and asking if he can help her. He gives her a stern look as she asks if he's a servant here. She anxiously explains that she wasn't supposed to be in this wing and got lost. Pleading with him, she explains it's dangerous for her here and begs him to show her the way back. The man stares down at the blushing Irelia with an intense, unreadable expression. A slow smirk spreads across his face as he thinks to himself how interesting she is. After leading her out, she looks back at the grand hall, now guarded by suits of armor. The man gives a casual wave, saying, "See you," as he turns to leave. Irelia points after him in disbelief, questioning why he's speaking to her so casually. As he walks away, he coolly remarks that she was doing it too, while she continues to question if he's really a servant. He glances back with a slight smile before striding down the magnificent hall, leaving the thoughtful Irelia watching him go. He turns to her and advises her not to be so tense, suggesting it would be easier for them both. Annoyed by his tone, Irelia retorts that he should be the one to watch how he speaks. He responds with a confident, knowing smirk, undeterred by her warning. With a final glance, he turns and walks away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. The scene transitions to a bright, sunny morning outside the grand estate. Lost in a pleasant daydream, Irelia blushes happily to herself. Yuri enters with a vase of red roses, finding Irelia still blushing and lost in her thoughts. Snapping back to reality, Irelia apologizes for spacing out and asks Yuri to repeat herself. Irelia reassures the concerned Yuri that she's fine, still smiling dreamily. She leans on the table, reliving her encounter with the handsome stranger. She recalls his features, a faint smile and a sharp jawline that always looked like it was about to smirk. Huh. Her pleasant daydream is suddenly interrupted as she looks up in confusion. Yuri asks if something happened yesterday to make her so distracted, and Irelia innocently asks what she means. A look of dawning horror crosses Yuri's face as she puts the pieces together. Irelia claps her hands with a bright, cheerful smile, confirming Yuri's unspoken suspicion. Yuri forces a smile, while Irelia daydreams happily about the mysterious man. Irelia rests her chin in her hands, a contented smile on her face as she thinks. Yuri says she's worked here for 5 years but can't recall any servant with blonde hair and dark eyes. Irelia explains that the handsome man simply helped her find her way out. Waving it off, Irelia tells her to forget it, prompting an apology from a confused Yuri. Yuri clarifies that the head butler and some of the guards have dark eyes. However, she adds that they are both well over 50, unlike the man Irelia described. Yuri gasps in sudden realization, and Irelia eagerly asks if she remembered something. Yuri states that Prince Meryl has dark eyes too, clarifying they are a deep blue rather than black. Irelia winces in pain at the mention of his name, begging Yuri not to bring him up. A flustered Yuri agrees to drop it, while Irelia decides she'll figure it out on her own. Now impatient, Irelia wonders when she'll finally meet her future husband, noting it has already been 5 days. Yuri stands nervously, hands clasped together, unable to give her an answer. Irelia looks out at the grounds, contemplating that a peaceful life here wouldn't be so bad. A bitter memory surfaces of her adopted sisters, cruelly taunting and pointing at her. She recalls her mission from the Marquis: bring the prince back to the royal family, and she will be free. Clutching her dress, her resolve hardens as she remembers her true goal. Her true ambition is revealed: reform the prince, get a divorce, and live freely as a noblewoman. Yuri reminds her that, ultimately, everything is up to Prince Meryl himself. Irelia sighs, looking utterly bored and exhausted by the situation. Yuri presents her with a document, and Irelia wonders if it's a contract. She leans in, intently reading the contents of the paper. Thinking of that man from the West Wing, she angrily rips the contract in half. Irelia angrily tears the contract in two as a shocked Yuri looks on. As the ripped pieces flutter down, Irelia furiously wonders what he takes marriage for. Realizing it was a marriage consent form, she seethes with rage, thinking of that murderer. Yuri watches in horror as the torn papers scatter across the room, marking a dramatic end. Irelia fumes, annoyed that he expects her to sign the papers without even meeting him first. Yuri timidly addresses her lady, but Irelia cuts her off, telling her to listen carefully. Irelia declares that this decision will change her entire life, leaving Yuri speechless. She thoughtfully bites her finger, contemplating the true meaning of marriage. She daydreams about an ideal romance, filled with dates, kisses, and happy moments together. Her fantasy continues to a beautiful wedding, believing you only marry someone you can't live without. The dream concludes with having grateful children who send you on a cruise trip. That's true marriage to her. Snapping back to reality, she's outraged that he expects her to sign before any of that romance. She furiously gestures at Yuri, continuing her passionate rant about the prince's audacity. Yuri thinks to herself, shocked, that comparing his highness to a cockroach is a bit much. That's not the point. Irelia shouts, completely exasperated. Covering her face in frustration, she calls for a timidly responding Yuri. With new determination, Irelia asks Yuri to arrange a meeting with the prince. She firmly instructs Yuri to make sure there are plenty of guards, and Yuri agrees. The scene transitions to a grand view of the castle exterior in the warm light. Later that evening, Irelia stands by a window with a basket of apples, realizing the day has passed. She takes a satisfying crunch out of a bright red apple. Feeling bored, she decides to explore the castle until it's time for dinner. She finds a strange room filled with hundreds of unlit candles and candelabras. Looking around the fantastical room, she feels as if she stepped into Alice in Wonderland. With a playful spark in her eye, she wonders if the apple she's eating is cursed and will shrink her. Approaching a large door, guarded by 2 suits of armor, she stops in sudden realization. Standing in a long, brightly lit corridor, she nervously wonders if this leads to the West Wing. Her thoughts drift to the handsome, blonde-haired man as she stands before the mysterious door. She hesitates, looking back and forth, unsure of what to do next. Blushing, she suddenly worries that meeting the handsome stranger again would be cheating on her fiancé. She dismisses the thought, deciding it doesn't count, before remembering her real worry, the devil of the West Wing, as she peeks inside. The dimly lit, ominous hall of the West Wing, lined with armored guards, appears before her again. Her heart thumps nervously as she thinks a ghost could pop out at any second. Gasp! A sudden voice from behind asks what she's doing there, causing her to jump in fright. Ah! A ghost! She screams, bolting down the hall in a blind panic. Huff! Huff! She collapses against a divan, completely out of breath from her terrified sprint. Looking up from her exhausted state, she lets out a confused, huh? She stares in stunned silence, a blush rising on her cheeks as a dark floral aura surrounds her. Now standing deep within the hall, she thinks to herself that she must have wandered pretty far in. Ugh! She hugs herself, shivering as she remarks how freezing it has become. With a sigh of resignation, she approaches a door, admitting to herself that she's here again. Thump! She flinches as a man in a dark cloak suddenly appears right in front of her. Huh? Wait, she whispers, her eyes widening in shocked recognition. Standing in the doorway is the handsome blonde-haired man, and she instinctively reaches for him. The blonde man coolly runs a hand through his hair as he gazes down at her. A close-up shows his stern, handsome features as he observes her. Her imagination runs wild, picturing him as a shirtless, godlike figure. Back in the dimly lit hall, she stares at him, utterly speechless. The handsome, blonde-haired man looks down at her, surrounded by an aura of blue and purple roses. The blonde-haired man asks if she can really not hear him, and Aurelia stammers that she heard him. Aurelia looks up at the blonde man with a startled expression. He notes that she looks freezing and offers her his dark, gold-trimmed cape. Wrapped in his cape, she looks up, surprised by his gesture. Blushing slightly, she remembers that she had been shivering from the cold. She vaguely explains that a lot happened, and before she knew it, she was here again. Blushing, she thinks to herself that she can't possibly admit she was hoping to run into him. Changing the subject, she asks if he knows the way out, and he notes she's asking the same thing again. He smirks, teasingly asking if she enjoys getting lost. She defensively retorts that she didn't get lost on purpose, especially not in a creepy place like this. She leans in and asks if he knows about the man everyone whispers about. She recounts the rumors, that he lives alone in the West Wing and hates intruders. Clutching her new cloak, she asks if living alone isn't weird, but he thinks to himself that it's not. She turns back in confusion, asking what he said. He calmly warns her that it's not a good idea to gossip about someone while in their territory. She admits she's been talking too much from boredom, complaining that after a week her fiancé still hasn't shown his face. As he listens, she fumes about her fiancé sending a marriage consent form and demanding she sign it. Looking indignant, she asks him if he agrees that it's a ridiculous demand. As she argues that marriage isn't that simple, the blonde-haired man just watches her rant. She boldly declares that even if the prince is fine with it, she doesn't agree to the marriage. He suddenly slams his hand against the door, trapping her. Shocked by his action, she wonders if her presence here implies her consent. She recalls their last tense encounter, where she warned him to be careful how he spoke to her. Pointing at him, she prepares to continue her lecture. The blonde man leans back nonchalantly, reminding her he only said he'd think about it. She comments that his name is rather long, and he retorts that she's one to talk. She explains that she usually goes by her full name. A flashback illustrates that nobles typically dislike nicknames unless used by close friends or family. He gently lifts her chin, causing her to look at him in surprise. Looking at her intensely, he decides he wants to call her Arya. Liking the sound of it, she asks what she should call him, suggesting Sal. He firmly rejects her suggested nickname. Horrified, Aurelia wonders if his rejection means he wants to keep a respectful distance and not get close. Her head droops in disappointment as he watches her reaction. He raises a finger to get her attention again. He points directly at her, making her look up at him. He tells her there's one more thing he needs to say. He calmly states that the guy she keeps talking about, the prince, isn't as bad as she thinks. Aurelia is left speechless by his unexpected defense of the prince. As he turns to leave, she desperately calls for him to wait, while he asks what she wants now. Flustered, she begs him not to tell the prince what she said earlier. She worries that the prince might have her executed if he hears her complaints. He casually agrees not to tell, leaving her standing anxiously. She reaches out again, shouting for him to wait one more time. With a blush, she shyly asks if she can come visit him again. He runs a hand through his hair with a slight smile, pondering her bold request. Seeing his hesitation, she anxiously asks if she can't come back. Misinterpreting his sigh, she worries that he truly hates the idea of her returning. He gives her a charming look, surrounded by a floral aura, and tells her he'll think about it. The scene transitions to a bright, sunny view of the grand estate. Irelia sits at a table, daydreaming about how charming the blonde-haired man is. Pulled from her thoughts, she startles Yuri by abruptly asking if she has a lover. Irelia is shocked to learn that not only is Yuri married, but she's also 32 years old. Amazed by Yuri's youthful appearance, Irelia asks about her skincare routine, but Yuri says she doesn't have one. Later, Irelia meets with a purple-haired aide in a formal room and invites him to have a seat. With her hands clasped nervously in her lap, she waits for the prince's official message. The aide adjusts his monocle, stating he will read the prince's message exactly as it was written. Irelia looks on with a wide-eyed, anxious expression during a dramatic pause. The prince's message is harsh. He is the master of the palace, and as a mere guest, she is in no position to make demands. She is left completely shocked by the prince's cold and domineering words. The message concludes with a challenge. If she truly wishes to meet him, she must come to the West Wing. Aghast at the intimidating arrangements, Irelia asks the aide if they're preparing for her execution. The aide tries to reassure her, claiming the prince isn't as violent or bizarre as the rumors say. Irelia breathes a sigh of relief, thinking the rumors about him killing hundreds must have been nonsense after all. Her relief instantly vanishes as the aide seems to say something that utterly shocks her. She leans in to whisper to the stunned aide, questioning the new information he just gave her. Hearing the prince's taunt in her mind, Irelia resolves not to back down and let him have the upper hand. Standing with sudden resolve, she announces that she is going to meet him now. Later, dressed in a purple gown, Irelia waits with her guards in a grand hall. Her heart pounds as she senses someone's arrival, realizing he's here. She watches intently as a figure walks past a sofa and approaches her. She gasps his name in disbelief, Yuri-san, as the handsome blonde-haired man appears. Stunned, she wonders why he is here and if he has come in place of His Highness. Quickly recovering, she flashes a bright, practiced smile to make a good impression. The blonde-haired man, however, looks on with a completely unamused expression. She maintains her sweet, blushing smile, undeterred by his cool reception. Looking up at him shyly, she continues her attempt to charm him. A faint, knowing smile touches his lips as he lets out a quiet, "Ah." She looks up at him with hopeful, clasped hands, awaiting his response. Internally, she wonders what type of woman he might prefer, a lively one or a quiet one. He surprises her by reaching out and gently touching the ribbon in her hair. Leaning in close, he softly touches her chin and calls her reaction amusing. Flustered by his forwardness, she asks him what he's supposed to mean. He simply gives her a smug, confident look in response. He leans in again, touching her chin and playfully asking what she thinks he meant. The atmosphere becomes intensely romantic as he closes the distance between them. The scene shifts to a flashback as fireworks explode in the night sky over the castle. The flashback begins at the 16th birthday party of the Empire's third prince, Merrill Van Hale Sitzfried. A young man presents a beautifully crafted sword to a younger, black-haired Prince Merrill. The young prince smiles, declaring the sword to be magnificent. Another guest kneels before him, offering a bottle of rare northern liquor. A sinister thought suddenly invades the prince's mind, telling him to drink the poison and die. Horrified, Prince Merrill violently grabs the guest who offered the drink as the crowd screams. The prince narrates that this was the moment his ability awakened, turning people's admiration into fear. The flashback shows that by touching the man's hand, he heard his vile, murderous thoughts. He explains that from then on, people wanted him dead, and it only got worse after he was added to the line of succession. A close-up focuses on the ornate, golden details of the prince's royal attire. In another memory, the prince's nanny of 10 years is shown serving him a meal. He recalls how even she tried to kill him in his sleep with a knife. The flashback concludes as he catches her wrist, stopping her blade just in time. He narrates that betrayal from his own men became a routine part of his life. Surrounded by blood, Prince Merrill reveals he killed everyone who tried to kill him. His twisted experiences led him to categorize all people in just two ways. He saw only those who wanted him dead, and those who were too terrified to approach. He recounts taking lives daily until he became numb, after which the emperor exiled him to guard the northern territories. He didn't mind the exile, believing he could finally find peace in a place with so few people. As the assassination attempts ceased, he felt his mind finally begin to clear. He reflects that aside from a few retainers, everyone else only saw him as a monster. His isolated world is suddenly interrupted by the thought of a white-haired woman. A memory flashes of the emperor standing with another noble. He recalls the pressure of his lineage, as his father always expected his power to be exceptional. His thoughts drift to the engagement, and the woman he's never met, pictured sleeping peacefully. The flashback concludes, noting that everything changed the moment she arrived in his life. The blonde man finds Irelia asleep in his bed, wondering why she would be there. Irelia murmurs softly in her sleep, completely unaware of his presence. Amused, he covers his smile and wonders if she is truly the Duke's adopted daughter. He gently reaches out, his hand hovering near her pillow as she sleeps. The flashback shifts, with him narrating that the West Wing is his private, solitary domain. He remembers suddenly sensing an intruder's presence in his study. His instincts on high alert, he immediately moved to investigate the potential intruder. He spotted a strange, shimmering light glowing from within one of the rooms. He discovered the source of the light was a woman with brilliant, sparkling silver hair. Hearing her gossiping, he's shocked that she believes he kills people without reason. As he watched her, he found himself captivated by her gemstone-like eyes. The scene flashes back to Irelia's startled gasp as she first noticed him. The symbolic image contrasts his current blonde-haired self with his younger, black-haired persona. He recalls his amusement upon realizing she had mistaken him for a servant. He remembers her indignation as she demanded to know why he was speaking so casually. She insisted that while he might not mind her informal tone, she certainly did. He smirks, remembering how he decided to let her impassioned lecture slide for the moment. Surrounded by sunflowers, he chuckles, charmed by her spirited nature. He recalls her shrieking and running away from him down the grand hall. He runs a hand through his hair, looking flustered by their chaotic first encounter. Later, he sits on his bed, deciding he needs to rest after the day's excitement. The memory shifts to Irelia looking shocked and flustered by their interactions. He then remembers her recovering with a nervous but cheerful wave. In his mind, she appears angelic and radiant, surrounded by a halo of roses. The memory is filled with an image of beautiful pink and white roses. His internal monologue concludes with a simple, powerful desire. He wants to know more about her. He remembers hiding by the door, trying to conceal his blush as he listened to her. A close-up reveals his determined expression, smitten by her presence. The scene shifts to their second encounter, where he leaned in and touched her chin. Flustered, she tells him he's too close, but admits she doesn't hate it, asking him to let go. He pulls back, observing that they aren't in that kind of relationship, leaving her to question what he means. He raises a finger, telling her he remembers something she said before. She covers her mouth in shock, wondering why he's bringing up her past words now. He recites her romantic definition of marriage, two people in love who date, kiss, and build a life together. She is left utterly speechless as he quotes her own words back to her. He gives her a knowing, triumphant smile, having caught her off guard. He leans back with a sigh while Irelia stares, both flustered by the charged moment. The blonde-haired man says he knows he'd be able to raise children who take after him and live a happy life. He stands before Irelia, who listens with a slightly stunned expression to his forward comments. Irelia glares intently at Yuri, who looks on nervously, completely baffled by the sudden scrutiny. A close-up shows Irelia's hand clenching her dress in frustration. She grabs his lapel, angrily accusing him of having people spy on her, but he calmly denies it. A wave of unease washes over Irelia as she considers his words. The blonde-haired man looks slightly surprised by her intense reaction. Flustered, Irelia points an accusatory finger at him while he scratches his head with an amused smile. With a serious expression, she asks him bluntly if he is going to kill her. Her earnest question makes his retainers in the background snicker with amusement. Irelia shoots a sharp glare at the guards, who immediately snap to attention. He gently brushes her hair from her face, catching her completely by surprise. Looking into her eyes, he tenderly cups her face in his hands. He explains that she's mistaken if she thinks he slaughters people without reason, asserting that isn't who he is. Blushing, Irelia softly asks him to tell her what kind of person he truly is. Leaning in close, he whispers that he'll answer her question later. He holds her close, their faces just inches apart in a tense, romantic moment. His expression is determined as he gazes at her with sparkling eyes. Internally, Irelia admits that if he weren't the feared murderer Merrill, she might have said yes. She recalls the man she met, who was kind, contrasting with the rumors of Merrill being a ruthless killer. She realizes with a shock that deep down, she's actually relieved he turned out to be Merrill. An angelic vision of him, crowned with purple roses, forms in her mind. He leans in, closing the distance as they are about to kiss. Panicking at his closeness, she thinks about her lack of romantic experience and asks what he means. He whispers in her ear that he is seriously considering living with her. Her thoughts race, recalling the rumors of Prince Meryl's twisted personality and his tendency to drive people away. A tiny, flustered Irelia wonders if the man making her heart race is the same person. Her thoughts continue as she feels his warm breath tickling her ear, making her blush. Lost in the moment, she gazes at him, completely captivated by the romantic atmosphere. She suddenly pushes against his chest, telling him to back away, but he simply asks why. As she struggles to push him away, she desperately begs him to just do it. He finally lets go, and she turns away, covering her blushing face with her hand. The man shoos away his curious aides, who quickly scurry out of the room. Irelia glances back at him, her expression a mix of apprehension and curiosity. The man pulls a rolled-up document from inside his coat. He looks her in the eye and gives her a firm, one-word answer. No. Resolved, Irelia decides she must stand her ground and ensure their marriage has no obligations. She presents her contract but inwardly struggles, admitting she can't give in to the temptation of seeing him daily. His expression droops and adorable cat ears appear on his head as he looks utterly dejected. He turns away from her, looking thoroughly disappointed. He slumps over in defeat, a gloomy aura surrounding him. As he looks back dejectedly, she feels guilty, thinking she's made him feel like the bad guy. Changing her approach, she suggests they make a different contract before discussing marriage. His devil horns pop up as his expression turns to one of pure, sparkling delight. Irelia beams, looking pleased that her new idea was a success. She dismisses the new devilish vision of him as just another one of her illusions. Recovering his composure, he smirks and agrees to hear the details of her plan. Irelia is left speechless by his immediate and eager agreement. He seems concerned by her suggestion, asking if they really need to go that far. The blonde man asks if she is suggesting they start by dating. Irelia is left blushing and completely speechless by his bold question. He smiles playfully, enjoying her flustered reaction to his proposal. He leans in, asking her to choose which condition they will follow. Irelia's thoughts reveal her own condition. She wants him to return to the imperial palace. Looking him in the eye, she declares that his return is her biggest condition. The blonde man's expression darkens in shock at her demand. He glares, his mood instantly shifting from playful to serious. His eye glows ominously as he realizes he has just stepped on a landmine. He laments that for a moment, he thought he'd finally found someone who understood him. In a fleeting memory, he recalls that the idea of her becoming his wife didn't seem so bad. Back in the present, he runs a hand through his hair, looking utterly frustrated. His expression hardens with deep disappointment. Irelia looks on with wide-eyed concern, shocked by his sudden change. Rip! He angrily tears her contract in half, right in front of her. Rip! The shredded pieces of her contract flutter to the floor. He coldly tells her that in the end, she was no different from everyone else. A close-up shows Irelia's eye, trembling with shock and disbelief. She watches in horror as he turns his back to her, ready to leave. Irelia panics, realizing she's messed up and can't let him walk away like this. Desperate, she stumbles forward, thinking she must say something to fix her careless mistake. She reaches out and grabs his arm, stopping him from leaving. Internally, she panics, wondering why she blurted out her demand. The blonde man pauses, turning to look back at her with a cold, unreadable expression. Flustered Irelia quickly suggests they sit down and talk over a meal. The scene shifts to them dining together in an opulent outdoor setting. Irelia maintains a nervous smile, trying to salvage the situation. She internally frets, admitting she's rambling and fears making things worse. She grabs his arm, and her gesture shatters the imagined peaceful meal. Back in reality, he stares down at her hand on his arm, his expression grim. Irelia looks up at him with pleading, desperate eyes. She concludes that he never intended to be honest with her from the start. She offers a pained, forced smile, her hopes crumbling. With her head bowed in defeat, she thinks to herself, "It's over." Later, Irelia sits alone in the parlor, looking dejected. She recalls his freezing cold eyes and the way he brushed her hand aside without hesitation. Overwhelmed with frustration, she buries her face in her hands. Utterly defeated, she slumps against the door of the room. A maid with short, light brown hair approaches Irelia with a worried expression. Aurelia wonders how she could possibly face him after everything that's happened. Touching her brooch, she feels her life is falling apart, having angered the rumored murderer. The maid suggests she rest for a bit, and a weary Aurelia agrees. The scene transitions, filled with thorny purple roses. Lying in bed amidst the flowers, Aurelia feels too heavy to move and just wants to stop thinking. The scene shifts to an exterior shot of the mansion. As a voice concludes a report, the blonde-haired aide, Yuri, stands at attention in the prince's study. The blonde-haired man listens from his desk as Yuri stands behind him. Yuri looks down with a concerned expression. The blonde man sits silently with his back turned, contemplating the report. He slowly swivels in his ornate chair, his expression pensive and troubled. The blonde man's eyes are filled with a troubled, intense determination. In the study, Yuri realizes with certainty that the prince already knows what he's thinking. The blonde-haired man stands with a solemn expression, a faint magical aura surrounding him. Yuri internally monologues that for 4 days, his reports on Lady Aurelia are met with the same dismissal. Reports are no longer necessary. Standing before the prince's empty chair, Yuri wonders what His Highness truly wants. The blonde man turns to face Yuri, his expression unreadable as the aide stands ready. His face is framed by an ethereal vision of white roses as he looks on with a serious gaze. From across the grand desk, Yuri addresses the prince, who listens with his arms crossed. The prince looks up at Yuri, his expression shifting to one of slight annoyance. Yuri flinches, realizing with a hint of concern that the prince is unexpectedly shaken up. The blonde man's gaze falls, his face a mask of solemn contemplation. He scratches his head, looking slightly flustered and confused. Yuri smiles with a knowing, almost teasing look, pleased by the prince's reaction. Yuri presses him, asking why, while the prince looks away, avoiding the question. The prince touches his chin, a small bead of sweat on his brow, as he appears lost in thought. Yuri correctly deduces that Aurelia must have made an unreasonable request of the prince. The prince turns away, clasping his hands behind his back in quiet contemplation. The scene shifts to an establishing shot of the grand, sprawling white palace. Meanwhile, Aurelia lies weakly in her bed, seemingly unwell. Flushed and feverish, she stirs restlessly under the covers. She realizes she's caught a cold, and, seeing his image in her mind, decides this is all his fault. Frustrated that he's ignored her for 4 days and won't let her apologize, she clenches her sheets. Slumped against a heavy door, she admits she was in the wrong but feels completely helpless. She clutches her aching head, looking faint and distressed. Weakly, she stands in a dark hallway, leaning against the door for support. Pressing against the door, she feels her head spin and her voice fail as she tries to call out. She slumps in frustration, knowing he'll ignore her, even as she pushes herself to her limit. A devious smile spreads across her face as she gets an idea. A loud noise might work, so she decides to just go for it. Thump! She dramatically throws herself backward, collapsing against the door. The door swings open, and she falls directly into the arms of the startled blonde man. He holds her in the doorway, a look of shock on his face as pink flowers bloom around them. Leaning in, he inhales her scent and notes that she smells like his bed, while she smiles peacefully. Relieved to finally see him again, Aurelia knows this is her one chance to say what she must. With a pained and blushing expression, she looks up at him, mustering her last bit of strength. As she faints in his arms, she makes a shocking request with her final breath. "Kill me." He shouts in alarm, calling out, "Arya!" as she goes limp in his arms. From inside the room, he desperately yells for someone to get a doctor immediately. Panicked, he scoops Arya into his arms and runs through the grand hall. The scene transitions to a quiet night outside the brightly lit mansion. The prince sits vigil at Arya's bedside, watching over her as she lies unconscious. Leaning close, he reflects that she's the one special person whose thoughts he can't hear. In a painful memory, he buries his face in his hands amidst thorny roses, thinking he could never accept her. He recalls his heartbreak, realizing she was just trying to use him like everyone else. He remembers how she persistently came to see him, calling his name over and over. He admits he thought ignoring her long enough would eventually make her give up. Back in the present, he watches her sleep with a gentle, softened expression. He recalls her collapsing and admits that in that moment, he couldn't remain calm. A romantic vision shows him tenderly kissing Arya's hand as she rests among a bed of roses. A flashback reveals Arya's memories of friends and family from her previous world, exposing her secret. Lost in thought, Arya wonders why she feels so alone, despite holding on to precious memories of her past. The scene shifts to her falling through a dark, starry void, visually representing her sense of isolation. The blonde prince leans over her with a look of relief and concern, confirming that she is finally awake. He gently places his hand on her forehead to check her temperature as she lies there dazed. Looking into her eyes, he softly asks if she is in any pain. Confused, Arya questions his words, recalling that she passed out after confronting him. As he starts to pull away, she instinctively grabs his hand, pleading for him not to go just yet. The prince pauses, looking down at her with a gentle, surprised expression. She's taken aback, wondering why he would let go after she told him his touch felt nice. With a relieved smile, she realizes he was just switching hands to cradle her head more comfortably. She looks up at him, assuring him that besides being tired, she feels okay. A sudden, mortifying thought strikes her. She must be a sweaty mess right now. Startled, she tries to sit up, declaring she feels gross and needs a bath, while he urges her to rest. He quickly catches her as she nearly faints, supporting her weakened body. Held in his arms, she internally fumes, wondering how he can ask if she's okay when this is all his fault. Looking him dead in the eye, she asks if he was disappointed because he thought she was like everyone else. She closes her eyes with a pained expression, bracing herself for his answer. Pulling away slightly, Arya stands her ground, determined to get a response. The prince looks at her with a serious gaze, telling her not to be ridiculous. He points out the absurdity of her expecting to change his life after knowing him for only a week. Firing back, she asks if he thinks she's some damsel in distress, waiting for a prince to save her. They stand facing each other, the air thick with unresolved tension. She passionately argues, questioning why she should be the one responsible for changing his life. Her expression is fierce as she continues her impassioned speech. Still fired up, she speaks with conviction, laying her feelings bare. The prince listens, his gaze softening as her words seem to finally reach him. Looking toward the distant palace, she reveals her simple reason for wanting to go. She likes warm places. She concludes her thought, asserting that, unlike him, she takes action instead of just waiting. The prince looks down, his expression filled with a quiet, sorrowful understanding. Her anger gives way to remorse as she admits that she also needs to apologize. Her expression turns vulnerable as she prepares to offer a sincere apology. In a soft, floral vision, she turns to him and apologizes, saying she never meant to hurt him. Back in reality, the prince lets out a small laugh, while Arya looks on with a smug smile. His laughter catches her completely off guard, and she wonders what he found so funny. He gazes at her with a curious, almost fond expression, a slight smile on his lips. He tells her she's reckless, unpredictable, and even a bit mischievous. He continues, remarking on how she can be furious one moment and apologizing the next. Arya reflects on her own behavior, slightly embarrassed that she, a marquis's daughter, is acting so impulsively. She looks him in the eye and boldly asks if he's saying he doesn't like someone like her. A gentle, knowing smile graces the prince's lips as he's surrounded by ethereal blue roses. He admits that he was furious at first, even swearing he never wanted to see her again. Touching his chest, he confesses that now he doesn't even know what his own heart wants anymore. Arya blushes furiously, her heart pounding in her chest as pink roses bloom around her. She frantically tries to calm herself down, insisting she's still supposed to be mad at him. Noticing her daze, he gently suggests she rest a little longer. He leans in close, his hand moving toward her face with a tender look. His gaze is intense and searching as he looks deeply into her eyes. Surrounded by white flowers, he gently lifts her chin, his words trailing off as he looks at her. He leans over her on the sofa, gently asking if she is feeling warm. The prince kneels by her side, noting her fever is returning, and warning her not to push herself, but she insists it's nothing serious. He looks down at her with a deeply concerned and troubled expression. Held in his arms, Arya insists she really wants a bath, but he offers to have hot water brought for a sponge bath instead. She argues that's not enough because she feels gross, but he leans in and firmly tells her she's not. As he insists she lie down, she whines about her bath, but he flatly refuses her request. The atmosphere turns romantic as he leans in close, leaving Arya stunned and wide-eyed. She reels in shock, internally questioning if he really just said what she thinks he said. With a sly, knowing smile, the The prince softly asks if they should bathe together. Wondering if he's teasing her, Arya boldly calls his bluff and agrees. Turning the tables, she leans in and smugly asks if he really thought she'd refuse, leaving him completely flustered. A close-up shows Arya's triumphant, smiling face as she savors his reaction. She whispers by his ear, causing him to flinch back in surprise as she moves closer. The prince, blushing and defeated, reluctantly concedes with a simple, "Fine." With a glint in her eye, Arya inwardly cheers, thinking, "Ha, got you now." They both stare at each other, mutually stunned by the unexpected turn of events. The prince looks away, still blushing but trying to regain his composure after her bold move. The scene shifts to a grand, steamy bath filled with fragrant pink rose petals. Now, wearing a simple white chemise, Arya looks at him with a smile and asks if he will wash her. The prince is utterly stunned by her direct request, stammering in disbelief. She explains that she doesn't even have the energy to wash herself, which seems to concern him. Blushing, Arya looks at him with wide, imploring eyes and softly says the name, Meryl. She presses him, asking if he's going to wash her or not, as he looks on in a blushing daze. Overwhelmed and flustered, the prince covers his mouth with his hand. Resigned, he begins unbuttoning his shirt with a flushed, determined look, surrounded by blue roses. A playful splash is heard as someone yelps in mock pain, complaining about being tickled. It's revealed he's only giving her a foot bath. He apologizes for being too rough while she sighs that it's heavenly. Looking up from her foot, Arya playfully accuses him of getting childish payback. She smiles, gloating that she completely caught him off guard with her teasing. The prince looks away, admitting he doesn't hate it, but insists this is a one-time thing. She leans over his shoulder, teasing him that being so uptight won't win him any love. Arya looks on with a bright, genuinely happy smile. The prince pauses his work, and they share a quiet, unspoken moment. He gazes at her with a gentle, slightly softened expression. He confides in her that he enjoys these moments, as they remind him that he's just an ordinary person too. Touched by his sincerity, Arya blushes and covers her mouth in surprise. Startling her, the prince suddenly stands up with a determined look on his face. Arya looks up at him, flustered and confused by his sudden action. He returns her teasing with a smile of his own, declaring it's now his turn to be washed. With a sly look, he throws her own words back at her about having a big heart and playing along. He grabs her hand and pulls her up, announcing it's her turn to wash him. Shocked, Arya is pulled forward, losing her balance. She falls toward him, and he instinctively moves to catch her in a panicked embrace. Splash! The basin of water topples over. Oof! Arya lands on the floor, crying out that she's hurt her foot. Lying on the ground, she looks up in alarm as the prince hovers over her, asking if she's hurt. He has fallen on top of her, their faces inches apart as he looks down with a panicked, emotional gaze. A cute chibi doodle illustrates the moment she tackles him in an accidental embrace. After their clumsy fall, the prince lies on the floor with Arya on top of him and asks if she is okay. Arya confirms she's fine and asks about him, but he awkwardly requests that she get off of him now. Realizing their compromising position, a flustered chibi Arya apologizes profusely. The tumble seems to have caused an injury to her foot. Sitting on the floor, Arya inspects her reddened ankle, wondering if she twisted it in the fall. The prince asks with concern if it hurts, and she admits it does, but thinks she can still walk. In a dramatic flourish, the prince removes his shirt, surrounded by a cascade of blue rose petals. Now shirtless, he effortlessly sweeps Arya into his arms, telling her to hold on tight as she looks on in shock. He carries her princess style down a grand, sunlit palace hallway. As they pass by stunned servants, Arya buries her face in his chest, mortified that everyone is staring. Her heart pounds as she blushes, nestled securely against him. Noticing her expression, the prince looks down at her questioningly. He looks at her with a soft yet determined gaze. With a confident smile, he declares that from now on, he'll keep their interactions at this level of closeness. Completely baffled by his statement, Arya wonders what he could possibly mean. Her mind races as she tries to figure out where a Princess Carrie ranks in terms of physical contact, panicked that a kiss might be next. A blue-haired butler intervenes, bowing and taking responsibility for Lady Irelia's rude behavior, much to the prince's confusion. When the butler offers to educate her, the prince questions his choice of words. Arya worries the butler was cold to her for not acting noble, while the prince internally disagrees, thinking she doesn't need any special education. The butler looks up, shocked by the prince's implicit defense of Arya. The butler insists he should have been stricter, but Arya internally panics, thinking he's going too far, and tries to interrupt him. Though Arya meekly apologizes to the butler, the prince coldly orders the man to step aside. As the butler looks down, rebuked, the prince explains that he allows Arya to speak informally with him. The prince glares, sternly reminding the butler of his place and questioning his authority. Defeated, the butler bows his head and says he understands. The prince walks away with Arya in his arms, leaving the humbled butler standing alone in the long hallway. Cradled against him, Arya reflects with awe that Prince Meryl is completely untouchable. She realizes he firmly puts everyone in their place if they step out of line, even those who have served him for years. She understands he intervened not for himself, but because the insult was directed at her. He gently sets her down, his hand lingering on her arm. The prince gazes at her with a gentle, thoughtful expression. Arya looks up at him, her expression soft and questioning. She decides she needs to learn more about him, and boldly asks if he will tell her about himself. The moment is filled with a soft, romantic atmosphere as she gazes at him among pink flowers. The scene shifts with delicate snowflakes falling against a soft, cloudy sky. She recalls how, for her, winter has always been synonymous with the joy and traditions of Christmas. Standing by a large window, she notes with some disappointment that there's no Christmas tradition in this country. A blonde maid enters holding a vase of red flowers, asking Arya where she should put them. Arya instructs her to place the flowers somewhere with good sunlight, which the maid accepts. An idea strikes Arya as she realizes she can create her own special occasion, even without a local Christmas tradition. She surprises the blonde maid by suddenly asking her if there is something she wants. Arya smiles and explains that she's asking because the year is almost over. Phew. Relieved her intentions are understood, Arya explains she wants to thank the maid for helping her adjust to her new life. She generously offers to buy the maid anything she wants, from jewelry to clothes. The maid claps her hands in delight while Arya listens to her request for gloves. Elsewhere, the prince sits in his study, pondering the concept of receiving a present. He seems perplexed by the idea of getting a gift simply because the year is ending. The blonde maid reports to the prince, informing him that she told Arya she wanted gloves. The prince thoughtfully considers the maid's report, a slight smile on his lips. Lost in thought, the prince rests his head on his hand, surrounded by an illusion of white roses. He turns to the blonde maid, asking her for advice on what would be a good gift for a woman. A blush creeps across his face as he thinks about the gift, clearly flustered by his own intentions. He gazes thoughtfully, his gentle blush deepening amid a backdrop of soft yellow flowers. As the scene shifts to the grand palace, the maid's voice continues the conversation, asking what would make the gift special. The blonde maid suggests embroidering the recipient's name on the sleeve of a beautiful winter cloak, explaining it would make the gift one of a kind. The prince thoughtfully considers her suggestion, repeating the words, embroidering a name to himself. The maid pictures the prince awkwardly attempting to sew and internally dismisses the idea as impossible. She offers to handle the embroidery herself if he provides the materials. The prince's face lights up with a brilliant, delighted smile, completely won over by the idea. Crackle. The scene shifts to a warm, cozy room with a roaring fireplace. At a sunlit breakfast table, the prince greets a white-haired woman, who replies that it's freezing again today. The white-haired woman, Arya, looks at him and asks if it's true what Yuri said about the weather getting even colder. The prince responds with a warm, knowing smile. Arya looks back, surprised by his cheerful demeanor. The prince expresses concern that staying inside isn't good for her, but she retorts, questioning if going out in the freezing cold is any better. As a servant serves her a dish, Arya lights up, exclaiming that it's just what she needed, while the prince watches with a grin. They share a pleasant look across the breakfast table. The prince lets out a small, amused chuckle. Arya gets an idea, brightly announcing that she should get some thicker clothes. The prince looks stunned by her practical suggestion, and Arya internally notes that it wasn't the reaction he wanted. The prince smiles, seemingly pleased with her idea. However, when Arya says she can't think of anything else she needs, his expression darkens with disappointment. A panicked chibi Arya internally wonders why he suddenly looks so annoyed. She asks if the food was bad, but the prince curtly says that's not it. He looks away sullenly, dismissing the topic and telling her to forget it. Looking out over the snowy palace grounds, Arya muses that she really doesn't understand his highness sometimes. Later, Arya complains to the maid, Yuri, that the prince asked if she was preparing for the end of year and then sulked when she said no. Yuri listens to Arya's confused recounting of the breakfast incident. Noticing the maid's reaction, Arya asks, "Even you're sighing, Yuri?" Yuri explains that she just finds the situation a little disappointing, that's all. A sudden thought strikes Yuri, her expression turning to one of shock. Yuri smiles brightly and asks Arya if she needs anything to stay warm. Arya declines, explaining that since it's too cold to explore the castle, she mostly just rests all day and doesn't need anything. Yuri listens patiently to Arya's explanation. Yuri points out that staying inside all day isn't healthy, but Arya counters, asking if freezing outside is a better alternative. Flustered by the comeback, Yuri stammers, unable to respond. Arya launches into a wild, dramatic tale of how stress will lead to gastritis, then a fatal hemorrhage, slamming her hand down for effect. Yuri looks on, absolutely horrified by the grim scenario. Arya continues her morbid fantasy, threatening to curse Yuri from her deathbed for forcing her into the cruel winter. Leaning in close, she threatens to haunt Yuri, whispering reminders for her to go outside. Kia Yuri lets out a terrified shriek, completely overwhelmed by Arya's dramatic threats. Having won, Arya smugly dismisses the terrified maid, who meekly agrees to leave her be. Arya collapses onto her bed, sighing that in the end, she never found out why the prince was upset. Yuri proudly presents a beautifully finished purple cloak with a white fur collar, announcing its completion. The prince holds the soft purple cloak, a gentle and pleased expression on his face. Arya greets Yuri with a pair of houndstooth gloves, calling her arrival perfect timing. Yuri gasps in delight as Arya presents the gift, humbly saying it was just something she had lying around. As Yuri thanks her profusely, Arya feels a pang of guilt for regifting, but is touched by the maid's genuine happiness. Beaming, Yuri reveals that she actually got a present for Arya too. Yuri reveals her gift is a special music box, custom made by her craftsman father just for Arya. She adds that the little silver-haired doll on top was made to look just like Arya. Deeply touched by the thoughtful gift, Arya apologizes to Yuri and promises to treasure it. Yuri blushes with happiness, pleased that Arya loves the music box so much. Later, Arya peacefully listens to the music box's gentle melody, a contented smile on her face. Meanwhile, Prince Meryl holds a large, beautifully wrapped blue present, ready to give his own gift. Arya opens her present and is delighted to find a beautiful purple cloak with a white fur collar. The prince smiles warmly, telling her he had it made just for her. Beaming with joy, Arya clutches the soft collar, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. As Arya exclaims that the gift is amazing, the prince smugly agrees with her assessment. She then raises her arm, revealing her name, Arya, has been beautifully embroidered on the sleeve. The prince proudly points, taking full credit for the special personalized touch. Though delighted, Arya wonders to herself why the prince would give her such a thoughtful gift. Her happy confusion mounts as she looks at him, completely baffled. The prince interrupts her thoughts by asking what she is going to give him in return. He holds out his hand with a playful smirk, expectantly waiting for his present. Arya is completely stunned by his sudden demand for a return gift. He repeats his question, "What are you going to give me?" His expectant expression unwavering. Internally, Arya panics, wondering who asks for a gift in return and what a wealthy prince could possibly want. Flustered and speechless, she stares at his outstretched hand, unsure how to respond. The prince asks what she wants, then reminds her that she gave a gift to the maid. Arya looks up, shocked and defensive at his seemingly random line of questioning. His eyes narrow with determination as he prepares to make his point. With a gasp of realization, Arya grabs the prince by his collar, startling him. "Fine," she declares, gripping his arm tightly. "I'll get you a present." Looking down at her hand on his chest, he asks with surprise what she plans to give him. Internally, Arya admits to herself that she'd like to know the answer to that too. Putting on a brave face, she tugs his collar and confidently proclaims, "I do," panicking that there's no turning back. She stammers that she'll give him his present right here. The prince looks down at her warily, completely bewildered by her strange behavior. Surrounded by an aura of pink roses, Arya points to her chest and declares, "Here." The prince's gaze follows her hand, a dawning realization on his face. As a blush spreads across his face, his mind immediately jumps to an intimate, scandalous conclusion. Seeing his expression, a blushing Arya clenches her fist, horrified by his misunderstanding. She forcefully shoves the prince away from her, mortified by what he was clearly thinking. Thrown completely off balance, the prince blinks in flustered surprise at her violent reaction. He quickly raises his hands, frantically insisting that's not what he meant. Arya stands with her arms crossed, completely unconvinced, as the prince looks flustered and guilty. She looks over her shoulder at him with a stern expression, asking if he realizes what he just did. The tense standoff continues between them in what appears to be a bedroom. Livid, Arya points accusingly and shouts at the pervert to get out, clarifying she's not giving him any underwear, ever. The prince recoils in absolute shock, his hands up defensively as he's hit with her accusation. Fuming, Arya turns her back on him with a frustrated sigh. The prince awkwardly tries to de-escalate, telling her to cheer up. She glares back, angrily asking if he even understands why she's mad at him. He scratches his head in genuine confusion, asking if it's because he thought she was offering her underwear. Arya lectures him that his assumption was sexual harassment and an instant fail, prince or not. The prince's expression turns serious as her accusation finally seems to register. After a moment of thought, he asks if he can ask her something in return. He asks what exactly she meant when she pointed and said, "Here," leaving Arya utterly confused. Prince Meryl stands with a puzzled expression, looking down as he replies to her question. Arya angrily gestures at the prince, who asks, "Didn't you?" as she fumes silently. The mood softens as the prince gently holds Arya's face, looking down at her with a tender expression. Leaning closer, he gazes at her affectionately, his expression soft and loving. Blushing, Arya panics internally, desperately wishing for someone to help her out of the situation. She flings her hands up in distress, wondering aloud why things always end up this way. Arya gives up and collapses face first onto the bed as the prince looks down at her. A faint blush appears on the prince's face as he looks down at her on the bed. Startled, Arya looks up as the prince's hand comes to rest on her shoulder. Now on top of her, the prince refuses to move as a flustered Arya calls him an idiot. She demands to be let go, but he insists on an answer first. She counters that she'll only answer if he moves. The prince's expression turns serious and determined as he gazes down at her. From an inverted perspective, a blushing Arya looks up at the prince leaning over her. He whispers close to her ear, suggesting a more physical conversation, leaving her completely stunned. The prince leans over her, his expression unreadable as he waits for her response. Arya protests that they aren't married yet, but he confidently replies that they will be soon enough. A realization dawns on Arya as she internally wonders if this means he's agreeing to all her conditions. Lying on the bed, she listens as he asks if she will now return to the imperial palace with him. A hint of a smirk plays on the prince's lips as he awaits her answer. Arya turns her head, looking thoughtful and slightly flustered by his proposal. The prince smugly assesses the situation, commenting, "Not bad." Completely flustered, Arya covers her blushing face with her hand. The prince leans down and nuzzles her neck, causing Arya's eyes to widen in shock. As he continues to nuzzle her, she winks, a slight smile playing on her lips. Arya muses internally that Meryl looks like a lost, anxious child who is desperate for love. He embraces her tightly, resting his head on her shoulder with his eyes closed. The prince pulls back slightly, looking down at Arya as she lies beneath him. Blushing, the prince looks down at her with a tender and vulnerable expression. Arya looks up at him, her own face flushed as she meets his gaze. Looking pensive, Arya is framed by a border of soft pink flowers. Prince Meryl looks away shyly, a bead of sweat on his blushing cheek. He leans in, his expression earnest and full of emotion as he looks at her. The two remain on the bed, close together in the tense, intimate moment. With a gentle smile, Arya reaches up and softly caresses the prince's cheek. The prince is visibly startled by her gentle and unexpected touch. As he leans into her embrace against the backdrop of a bright window, Arya agrees, "Then let's do it." He rests his head peacefully on her chest, a serene expression on his face. Arya smiles contentedly, gently cradling the sleeping prince in her arms. The prince's thoughts drift to a painful memory of a stern mother who never held him. He recalls a suspicious stepfather and the accusing glares of others who viewed him as an enemy. He remembers fighting alone to escape the pain until he finally found someone who could offer him warmth. In his memory, A glowing, gentle hand rests on the shoulder of his younger self. Young Meryl looks up to see the luminous, faceless figure of a long-haired woman. Returning to the present, Arya looks down with a radiant and loving smile. Surrounded by floating cherry blossoms, they lie together as Arya's happy face fills the foreground. Arya holds the prince's head, stroking his hair with a blissful and peaceful expression. The scene shifts to a grand, snow-covered mansion, as narration describes the howling winter winds. A letter confirms that Prince Meryl's request to return to the Imperial Palace has been granted. As a short-haired maid packs a trunk, Arya instructs her to leave behind anything that doesn't fit. Arya gazes peacefully out a window, lost in thought. The scene shifts to a memory of Prince Meryl, who recalls the Emperor advising that a marriage would secure Meryl's position and keep him close. Arya lets out a soft sigh, her thoughts drifting back to a pivotal moment. In the memory, a smiling, dark-haired man is asked if he dyed his hair. The dark-haired man gives her a warm, knowing look in return. The man asks if she is all packed, and Arya confirms they just need to load the carriage. If the weather turns, then I might freeze to death. Gently touching her hair, the man tells Arya that the harsh weather is precisely why they're leaving. He looks down at her with a fond, affectionate expression. A caravan of carriages travels through a vast, snowy forest. Later, sitting together, Arya asks him what he's referring to, and he calmly replies, "The marriage." She presents him with a document, and he expresses shock at her sudden cooperation, prompting her to pout and threaten to take it back. A hand signs a formal agreement with a black and gold feather quill. Holding the signed document, Arya suggests they wait until the expected commotion at the palace dies down. The dark-haired man looks at her and softly agrees with her sensible plan. Exhausted from the journey, Arya falls asleep on his shoulder as he says he'll also get some rest. The man gently rouses a sleeping Arya from her slumber, telling her, "Arya, we're here." Yawning and stretching, Arya wakes up from her nap in the carriage. Their carriage arrives in a lively, sunlit town square.